All right, hey everybody. I'm recording this video for ART 105 at McNeese State University. I don't know if all my videos are going to start that way. That was weird. Okay, this is a video that is going to be an intro to Photoshop. It's just walking you around the workspace. It's going to be a good reminder for anyone who was in class this week, and is going to be good information for anyone who had to miss class this week. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is getting Photoshop and Illustrator onto your home computers. So this should be pretty easy, but sometimes there are some glitches. So I'd like you to try to do this before we meet next week. That way you are set and ready to go, and I'm able to troubleshoot with you between now and then. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And all right, so to get the Adobe Creative Suite on your computer, you're going to start by going to adobe.com. And it doesn't matter if you have a Mac or a PC. This should work either way. So you're going to go to Adobe, and then you're going to go over here to this sign in button. So you'll click on that. And if you already created an account in class the other day, then you should be able to just enter your McNeese email address and go from there, and your password. If you did not create an account in class, if you missed class, then you're going to want to go ahead and create an account. And here, if you do this, create an account, you're going to enter your McNeese email address and the information that it asks you for. And I think it'll text you a code. Just follow the directions and you should be set. So going back to signing in, I'm going to sign in. I'm going to attempt to sign in. I'm not going to add a backup email. And from here, you should be able to open Creative Cloud. If you get a message that's asking you to start a free trial or to buy the Creative Cloud, don't do it. If you get that message, then send me an email, and then I'll connect with IT, and Curtis will work his magic from our end. So if you do not have the option to open Creative Cloud, then alert me, okay, so that I can help you. If you are able, then click that button. And you'll want to install the Creative Cloud app over here. After you've installed the app, you should be able to access the Creative Cloud through this button up here. Okay. That's a little Creative Cloud symbol. Or it may show up in your dock down here, or it may be in your applications folder. Once you've done that, I want you to go ahead and open Photoshop. In Photoshop, when you first open it, it's this little symbol on the bottom, or you can open it from your Creative Cloud menu. You'll get to a window that looks like this. These are past projects I was working on, and you're going to want to create new. And let's go ahead and choose this custom. It's 8.5 by 11 inches at 300 pixels per inch. Double check the size, 8.5 inches, 11 inches. It's up to you whether you want it to be portrait or landscape. And choose a resolution of 300 and make sure that you're in RGB color. And create. So now I have this new blank document. And this is referred to as your canvas. And now I'm just going to walk you through some of the basic stuff in Photoshop. So like I said, this is the canvas. I like to, when I first open Photoshop, especially if I've been working on a shared computer, I like to go to Window, Workspace, and either check Essentials or reset Essentials. So if something else is checked in here, then choose Essentials. And if Essentials is already chosen, reset it. This just sets all the palettes where, I don't know, where they will hopefully match mine. All right. On the left-hand side of your screen, you're going to have the tool palette. And here are a bunch of different tools that you can use to create things in Photoshop. With each of these tools, there are other settings. There are like, I don't know what this would be called, but I call it the submenu. So as I go through those different tools, you'll see that up in the submenu, the options here change. I guess maybe these are the preferences. You'll also see that, if you click on one of these tools, it's going to give you a quick preview of what that tool does. But again, with each one of these tools, the stuff up here changes. Also, with each of these tools, or many of these tools, if you hold down on the tool, you'll find that there are other tools underneath that tool. So there are a lot of tools to play with and explore. And don't be afraid to explore. Don't be afraid to experiment, see what happens. You're not going to break it unless you drop your computer. Above this submenu is just your regular top menu where you see the word Photoshop, File, Edit, Image, Layer. And in here, you'll find things that probably look familiar, like New, Open, Save As. Same with Edit. You'll have options for copying and pasting, stuff like that. And on the right-hand side, you'll have this set of what are called palettes. If you have an extra large palette next to these palettes that says something about Learn, you can use the little double arrows to collapse that palette over. The palettes that we will most frequently be using are the color palette. Here we've got the properties palette, but attached to the properties palette is the adjustments tab. So that one we will use. And most importantly, I think, is the layers palette. So as I described in class earlier, Photoshop is built upon this idea of layers where we're stacking things on top of each other. And we can see in the layers palette, it's kind of a cross section of those layers. And when we look at the canvas, we're seeing through the layers. So right now, all I have is a background layer, and this thumbnail matches what I'm seeing here. Now, if I were to choose my shape tool, which is down here. Also, there were a couple people I noticed in class, their shape tool was hidden underneath this little 3 dots. So if you're not seeing it in your toolbar, then look under those 3 little dots. So if I have the shape tool chosen and I come up to my submenu and I choose the word shape, when I draw a shape, well, it's see-through right now, because if you look up here in that submenu, the fill is nothing. That's what a white rectangle with a red slash through it means. It means there's no color. So I can change that color, change that to a nice McNeese blue. And if I come over here and use my arrow tool, it will deselect that rectangle. But what I was going for here is that I wanted to show you, when you draw a new shape, it automatically creates this new layer. And what that means is that this shape now is movable by itself. It's not attached to the background. I can use my move tool, or sometimes I call that the arrow tool. I can use that to move my shape around. And that is because it is independent and it's in its own shape. Or I mean, it's in its own layer. If I were to then draw another shape, let's say I wanted to use the ellipse tool, I could draw another shape over here, and it will create its own layer, which I can then come around and move again independently. If I want to change the color of that shape, I just go back to the shape tool and come up here to the fill. And if I want a whole palette to choose from, I can click on this little rainbowy thing. And let's say I want this really bright green. You'll also notice that you have this option for the stroke color. The stroke is a border around your shape. Right now it's very hard to see because it's a really little border, but if I up the pixels, you can see now it has an outline basically. But I could change the color of that. I could also, if I didn't want any stroke color, I could say no stroke color. Again, that white rectangle with the slash through it is no color. So also notice that over here in my layers palette, my ellipse is on top of my rectangle. So if I move my ellipse, it will appear on top of my rectangle. I can change that order. If I want the rectangle to be on top, I can grab onto it in the layers palette and move it up. And now the rectangle is on top. Another thing to play with in Photoshop is the brush tool. And I'm really giving you the brush tool to play with just because it's a quick and easy thing to play with. Honestly, we're not going to use the brush tool a whole lot. Photoshop is not designed for drawing. There are other better programs for that, but it's a fun and easy and quick way to just like get something going. Now the brush tool, unlike the shape tool, does not create its own layer. So you can see I have this little no symbol on my cursor. I won't be able to draw anything. That means that I need to create a layer for my brush strokes. The new layer symbol is down here at the bottom of the layers palette, or you can come up here to layer and choose new layer. You can give it a name if you want. I'm not going to. And now with the brush tool, I can draw some squiggles. There's also a lot of fun things with the brush tool. Keep in mind that unlike the shape tool that you can change the color of afterwards, with the brush tool, it's actually better to change your color ahead of time. So if I don't like that color, and if you make a move in Photoshop that you don't like in general, you can go to edit and undo. So to change the color of the brush, I'm going to come down here to this color picker. And let's pick another fantastically awful color, magenta. And now I can draw my magenta squiggles. Keep in mind too, that now that layer is above the rectangle and above the ellipse. I can change the order of that. And I can use the move tool to move, it's a skinny line, to move my magenta squiggle. If you find that it is not automatically grabbing onto whatever it is you want to move, there's this option up here to auto select layer. If that's unchecked, it's only going to move whichever layer you have chosen over here. So if you want your mouse to recognize what you're trying to move, turn that auto select on. And if the lines are skinny, sometimes it's hard to grab onto that. So once again, with the brush tool, I'm going to pick a different color. There are lots of fun things to play with. So I can play with the size of the brush, make something bigger. And then there are all these different weird brushes that you can play with. Soft pressure brush doesn't look much different than the other one I was just playing with. Dry media brushes, trying to kind of emulate using different drawing tools so you can see the texture of that line. So those are fun to play with. Some people in class today found some brushes that made them some trees, I think. I don't know. It was cool. Photoshop, I mean, I don't know if I told you this earlier, but I've been working with Photoshop for over 20 years, and there's every class period, I am still discovering something new through the experiments that you all do. So it's really fun for me, but it also just shows the depth of this program. There's a lot that can be discovered. So you may want to pause the video at this time and do some of those things. I'm going to keep going, but that's the beauty of video. You can pause it. All right. So the next thing that we did in class that I would like you to do, if you were absent, is we played with this idea of copying and pasting, which is what we're going to do in class next week. The first thing to do in this exercise is to flatten your image. And that means what we're going to do is we're going to squish all these layers into the background layer. To do that, I'm going to go to Layer, Flatten Image. And now you can see that everything is all just in the background. To select something, there are a couple different options, but let's start with the rectangular marquee tool. This is going to allow me to just draw a rectangular box that then has marching ants. Once I have those marching ants, that means I have that area selected. So it's like highlighting a couple words in a Word doc. Then I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do Edit, Copy, or if you're a keyboard shortcut person, it's Command-C. And then I'm going to make a new document. And I'm going to make a new 8.5 by 11, double checking these settings over here, RGB color, good, create. Then I'm going to paste. So you can see that it pasted just that selection that I made. Now I can toggle back and forth between my two documents. Let's say I want to make an elliptical selection. I can do that, and then I can copy. I'm keyboard shortcutting, Command-C and Command-V. These are kind of not super interesting because I didn't make the background a color, but that's okay. From here, I want you to make note of the fact that you can change the shape of these selections that you've copied and pasted. So now things are probably going to start getting kind of messy, but these are all tools that we're going to be using next week. And these are things that I'm going to review next week as well. But once you've pasted something, you've got that layer chosen, play with this. Go to Edit and Transform. And here you can choose to scale it, make it smaller or bigger. You can rotate it. Oh, but what happens if you choose skew? You get this bounding box and you have these little anchor points that you can grab onto and pull to skew that shape. So now it looks like it's receding back into space. Anytime you do one of these transformations, you have to apply the transformation. So you have to press the return key or press this little check mark up here. And now it's that shape. You may want to not make a selection that is this perfectly pre-created shape. Maybe you want to do something a little bit weird. You can come back over here to your original document and you can use the lasso tool to make a selection. This is going to produce those same marching ants, but it allows you to create this more free form shape. Again, once you've got the marching ants, you can copy, come over here, paste, go to the move tool and move that new shape around. One last tool to show you is underneath this lasso tool is the polygonal lasso tool. And this one can be a little dangerous, and that's why I want to show it to you, because it's one that you might get stuck with. Before I do that, I'm going to deselect. I'm going to get rid of those marching ants by going to select and deselect. And now the polygonal lasso tool works a little bit differently. It works where you plot one point and now there's this spider web attached to my cursor. Then I plot another point, plot another point, plot a point, plot. And you have to bring your cursor back to your starting point and you'll get that little circle underneath the cursor. No circle, circle, no circle, circle. And when you click to close, then you get the marching ants, which you can then copy and paste. And then move around and distort or transform or do whatever you want. So that's really the extent of what we did in class this week. It allows you to just get into the program, get started, start seeing how the workspace looks. And you don't have to turn this in. This is just playing, experimenting, getting our feet wet. If you did happen to create a masterpiece, and maybe you did, I sometimes accidentally create amazing things when I'm doing demos, then you might want to save it. And you're going to have to save things in this class anyways. So to save this, you're going to go to File and Save As. And it's actually, it's going to ask you whether you want to save to the cloud or to the desktop. If you're at home, you can just save to your desktop. Or unless you prefer to save to the cloud. And I don't know, oh, here we go. If I wanted to save to the cloud, here's my option. You're probably going to get a screen that has two little things that say save to the computer, save to the cloud. Save it where you want to save it. Give it a title that you want it to have. And then save one version as a Photoshop file. Make sure you know where it's going. So if you're saving it to your desktop, make sure you know that it's going into a appropriate file folder. So I'm going to save it into Digi because this is digital approaches to art. Give it a name. If you get this message, maximize compatibility, say okay. And then I want you to save it as a JPEG as well. The JPEG is the universal file format for images. So that's what you'll ultimately end up saving things as in order to turn them in. Like I said, you're not going to turn this one in, but just to get in the habit of saving things as both a Photoshop document and a JPEG, go ahead and save it as a JPEG. Once again, make sure you know where it's going. save. Make sure it's on maximum quality and baseline standard, and okay. And after you've done that, you are safe to close these documents that you've made. Oh, well, I didn't save this one. I only saved the final one. I don't really need to save this one. If you want to save your original one, that's up to you. Okay. And then finally, you're going to want to, if you're on a lab computer, you're going to want to go up here to this blue circle and then the blue circle again, and you're going to want to sign out. I'm not going to sign out because this is my computer and I'm going to be doing some Photoshop later. So I'm just going to leave it signed in, and you can do the same. You can leave yours signed in on your home computer too, but just know that if you come into the lab, you can only be signed in on one computer at a time. So you'll want to make sure that you sign out before moving on to a different computer. And this concludes the quick tutorial of kind of getting to know the Photoshop environment and how to get Adobe on your computer. And since I have your attention, I think, if you missed class, your homework, and I'm going to post this, but your homework is to take 10 photographs of texture. So that could be tree bark, sidewalk, could be ceiling tiles, could be something interesting you find on the floor. It doesn't have to be like a regular pattern. You know, it could have variation to it. It could be some funky mold you found growing somewhere. Don't touch it though. Photograph it, fill your frame with the texture, and make sure you have access to those for class next week. All right, that's it, and I will see you soon. All right, bye.